This isn't from the garden, but I did want to show you guys these beautiful eggs. Our chickens finally started producing more eggs. I invested in some colorful egg layers this spring, and we've all been eagerly awaiting our first eggs, and they finally started. We've got some Starlight green eggers, cream leg bars. I don't have any blue eggs here right now. They're barely just getting started. Morans. So with all those eggs, one of our favorite breakfasts is crepes. It's also a wonderful way to use up all the fresh fruit that is available this time of year. You've got too much zucchini and your friends have said they don't want it. What are you gonna do? Big, huge, overgrown zucchini like this, there's a couple options. I like to either make zucchini bread. I've got a really good zucchini bread recipe, by the way. Or I like to make zucchini boats. I love doing sausage and rice stuffed zucchini boats. They're delicious. I think they're delicious anyways. A third thing that a lot of people don't realize they can do with a really big overgrown zucchini like this and even like this. By the way, this would make the cutest little boat, don't you think? It makes a great filler. So if you're making tacos, for example, grate your zucchini up, saute it, or cook it in some olive oil until it's cooked. Add taco seasoning to it and add it to your taco meat. Nobody will know it's there. It will up the nutrition and it will stretch your meat, which, hey, who couldn't use that right now, right? Another fun favorite with zucchini that even my older kids got on board with making because of how much they loved it is fried zucchini. You can't beat fried zucchini. It's one of my favorite things. There's something so down home and comfort food about fried zucchini. And there's so many different seasoning options you can go with. I'm gonna set aside all of these neat little perfect ones that are kind of fat, but I know they're gonna have a lot of seeds inside. I'm gonna set them aside for zucchini boats. These smaller ones, I have a special dish I'm gonna show you guys how to make. It is really easy and it's a great way to use up a whole lot of smaller zucchinis. With this recipe, the zucchini cooks down to almost nothing, so you actually need a lot if you're really going to have very much in the end. So the first trick is to slice your zucchini, and you want it to be fairly thin. Since the flavors and seasonings in this dish are kind of minimal, you want a nice high quality olive oil to help take this to the next level. A good high quality olive oil almost has like floral notes to it, and it can really make this dish. And on that note, you don't want too much. I want to say maybe 2 teaspoons to a tablespoon, and that's about all you want to use. You don't want too little, but you don't want too much because, like I said, this cooks down so much and it will almost be greasy if you have too much on here. So I'm just tossing all of this with some salt and the minced up garlic. You can save the minced up garlic to put on the very top last. That helps keep it from burning. The next thing that I'm going to do with these is I'm going to top them with just a little bit of pine nuts. You want about a tablespoon per dish here. You don't need many. You can use walnuts. Walnuts are wonderful in this too. Lastly, we're going to use some roasted red pepper. I have some roasted red pepper still left in my freezer from last year's garden, and I'm just going to kind of mince this up, not mince it, maybe just dice it up pretty small and scatter it over the top. This makes the dish really good. While that is cooking at 400 degrees Fahrenheit until golden, let me show you the pickles and curtido from the last video. In part one, I showed you guys how to make fermented pickles and fermented curtido. So I wanted to show you it's done. It is the 4th day. So I want to show you guys what you can expect it to look like. It's a little cloudy. You want to refer back to part one in this series to see how I made this. So the next step is we put it in the refrigerator. And if we were to eat this right now, it would be pretty powerful. We want it to mellow out, so we don't want to eat it right away. There's a few reasons for that, but we want to wait about a couple weeks before we actually dig in and start enjoying this.
Something I forgot to show you in the last video when I was showing you how to make this is you want to put that in a dish because they will leak. The cook time for your zucchini may vary due to a few factors, one being how thick you cut it, another one being, you know, like the altitude you're at. So let me just show you what you want it to look like. You want some of the parts of it to start to turn caramelized like this. You don't want too many like that, but as soon as some of them start getting a little bit of a caramelized edge, that's when you know it's perfect. I wanted to show you my new kitchen tool because of how well it worked. It's stainless steel, no enamel to chip off into your bread or your product. I'm amazed at how much better this worked instead of the traditional dough hook. This fits right on your KitchenAid. I'll link to it below for you. Another favorite that we love are margarita pizzas. Our goats are still producing so much milk, so I have been making lots and lots of mozzarella. It's so easy, you guys. I shared it in one of my videos recently, what to do if you've got too much milk, so be sure to look for that if you want to know how to make your own mozzarella. This is a wonderful way to use up excess basil and of course enjoy those garden fresh tomatoes. I have my sourdough bread recipe on my website if you would like that. These are some lightly breaded sesame green beans that my daughter made. It's kind of her own invention. She put some soy sauce on them. Actually, it was coconut Amy knows we don't use soy sauce, but you could. In my last video, I made a raspberry filled lemon basil gluten-free cake. I will have the recipe on my website for you. In that video, I promised to share some of my cake decorating tips. Now, I'm far from an expert. I am completely self-taught when it comes to decorating cakes, and you can probably tell by looking, but I don't feel like it's half bad, and my family always loves my cake, so I thought I would share a couple of the tricks that I use here, just to make the whole frosting process a little more attractive and easier. We'll start with what I'm filling the cake with, though. In this scene, I whipped up some raspberry jelly from the Pomona's Pectin cookbook. I like this cookbook because it has reduced sugar recipes, and the recipes are absolutely lovely.
I have a little trick for frosting cake, and it's kind of cheating. Apparently it does dry the cake out a little bit, but whenever I want to have a cake that I want it to be perfectly frosted and I want it to turn out really beautiful for something, this is how I do it. I freeze the cakes. I just freeze them until they're nice and solid, and then it's gonna make it completely super simple to frost. This one I wrapped in wax paper. Little trick here. If you don't want your cake to go sailing, put some frosting down on the base before you put the cake down. This will kind of act like a glue, and it will help hold the cake on the stand. Not a lot.
You don't want the filling coming out of the sides and squishing out of the sides, so you want to stop with the filling just maybe about a ½ inch or so before the edge of the cake. So what I'm doing here is I am turning the cake. It'd be easier if I had a turntable, but I'm holding the spatula in place and I'm just turning and letting the frosting even out and fall off the top edges of the cake. One of the tricks is to use too much frosting. You want a lot of frosting to work with on the top of the cake, so I will pile it on there like an inch thick and then thin it and even it out. If you do too little, it is hard to get it just dry, and if you have to keep piling on after you've put too little on, it tends to get crumbs in it. For the sides, I don't know if this is the right way to do it, but I like to start on the seam and I just smash excess frosting in. You can always take it off. It's hard to put frosting on if you've already got too little on there, but it's easy to take the excess frosting off.
I decided to learn cake decorating before I even had kids because I wanted to be able to always do my kids' own birthday cakes. That meant a lot to me. So before I even had a family, I was a homemaker for the family that I grew up in, I learned how to do cakes. I don't know how old I was, maybe 18. I didn't get married until I was 25. Of course, I didn't have kids till after that. After I started having children, I decided to just improve my cake making skills. And I used to be very good, but I have lost skill in this over the years. Probably about 5 years ago, my kids decided they wanted, instead of my cakes, they wanted ice cream cakes. And really, I don't know that I blame them because half my kids are born in July. I think the ice cream cake is definitely understandable. I am super excited to tell you guys there is no food coloring in this cake. I made the frosting yellow with turmeric. I just kept adding little bits at a time until the color was just right. This would be a lot easier if I had a turntable, but I do not. Or I do, but I don't know where it is. I think I'm gonna give this a little bit of a vintage side here. I call it vintage, probably because I saw it in a really old cookbook. I think this looks fit for a princess. Bok choy, zucchini, cucumbers, peppers, kale. Green beans are coming on, carrots, radishes. Ooh, look at this one. Got a little bit waterlogged. First head of cabbage, more pickles and zucchini. We've got sage. Yummy, yum. I'm going to dehydrate the sage. I washed some of my summer shoes over the weekend. And I set them in the laundry sink to dry, and I went to get them today. I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog too.
Since we're on the topic of the family dinner table, I thought this was a perfect time to address who the Bible says shouldn't be at our table.
For the faith portion of this video, I'm going to answer a really hard question I got from a subscriber a couple months ago. This question has to do with how to handle toxic and emotionally or verbally abusive family members, and how to do so as a Christian. I have found in the Bible it actually has a lot more to say about this topic than we realize. And sometimes we think we're doing the Christian thing when we're not really.
As I talk, I thought I would show you some scenes as well as some cut scenes from part 1. And if you didn't see part 1 and you want to know what's cooking, you can just go back and watch that one. I will link to it down in the description below. Everybody is familiar with the Bible verses that encourage and command us to forgive. Everybody is familiar with the Bible verses that tell us to turn the other cheek. It is true, we are commanded to forgive. And before I move on, I will share that I found an app, the YouVersion app, and there is a plan called The Power to Forgive, and it breaks down forgiveness in such a way that made it easy for me to understand, and it broke it down into steps. I love how simple the author of that plan made the concept of forgiveness easy to understand. If you're struggling with forgiveness, I highly recommend it. There's a misunderstanding though about what forgiveness is and what it isn't, and I just want to clarify something it is not. Forgiveness is not allowing a person who is continuously and purposefully hurting us and who is unrepentant and never sorry to continue doing so. This is a gross misunderstanding in the Christian world. I would like to turn your attention to 1 Corinthians 5:11, and it says, "But I now have written unto you not to keep company with any man who is called a brother, if he is a fornicator or covetous or an idolater or a railer or a drunkard or an extortioner." If you do a little word study and look up the original meaning in the Greek of railer, the actual definition is somebody who is verbally abusive. Let that sink in. So what can we do? Well, sometimes this question is a lot more complicated to answer, and others it's a little easier. Sometimes this question does require intervention. It requires a professional counselor, but in the Bible we do have a protocol to follow when we've been sinned against. In Matthew 18:15-17, we read, "If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have gained your brother. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector." Essentially, that means we are to have little, next to nothing to do with the person. In my experience, when I haven't obeyed these 2 verses, when I've misunderstood the scriptures, thinking I need to just forgive, I need to turn the other cheek, things usually end extremely badly, and I'm left dealing with far more to forgive and even bitterness on top of it. When these verses really sank in, suddenly it became easier to forgive because I realized I had been putting up with certain behaviors that God never expected me to. I realized that I actually had a command from the Bible not to even eat with the people that had really hurt me and my husband and children. When you realize you had the power all along, and not only the power but the command, it kind of puts the responsibility back on yourself. Something else I want to point out is that it is a lot easier to forgive and to pray for a person in sin when you're not constantly licking your wounds from whatever lashing out or hurtful things that they've said. Last, if you're constantly getting mistreated and you're constantly re-navigating from being hurt and trying to process that hurt, you're wasting a lot of time and a lot of energy there that could be much better spent serving your family and focusing on your children or in other areas. And another thing I've learned is sometimes you simply need a break. There's a certain family member that I didn't think I was ever going to have a relationship with again. The relationship was so toxic and I walked away from it thinking I was never going to speak to them again. After about 5 years, something in my spirit told me there had been a shift, and there had. And we were able to slowly but surely begin the rebuilding process of a much better relationship than we had ever really had. But it did take time because there was still a lot of healing that needed to take place. Boundaries are critical when dealing with anybody, including family members, that overstep their bounds. Again, it's really helpful to get a professional Christian counselor if you need to help you create and define healthy boundaries. I encourage you to study Galatians 5 verses 19 through 26. If somebody is emotionally or verbally or physically abusive, these are all acts of the flesh, and that person will not inherit the kingdom of God. So to allow them to continue in their abuse is to allow them going down the same path that is going to take them straight to hell. Our motive with these people should be to pull them back, to snatch them out of the fire before it's too late. If it's not safe to approach the person, like in Matthew 18, then we definitely want to do an intervention type process or take a break from the person until you know that they might be willing to listen to you. But ultimately, if they refuse, we're to move on. We're not supposed to just sit there and allow them to keep abusing us. Over the weekend previous to this, we butchered the rest of our meat birds. I shared the process in a video. You can go look for that if you want to see how to butcher meat birds. They've been in the fridge for a couple days and now it's time to cut them up.
So after you butcher your meat birds, it's a good idea to let them go through the whole rigor mortis or I don't know what it's called. I always say they need to stop being vigorous. So I put them in the refrigerator for 48 hours. And the 48 hours is about up, so I need to process the chicken and get it all put away in the freezers today.
by the end of this harvest day, I was so tired. This is the busiest and in a way the hardest time of the year for our family. I work between 14 to 17-hour days between homeschooling, the homestead, running the home, parenting of course, and then this job. Sometimes it all gets me down, but then when I remember what it was like when we were living in town for a few years and we weren't living country life and homesteading life, it was just, well, let me put it this way, those were the bad eating years. In fact, mine and my husband's health tanked in such a way that we're still struggling to get our health back. There is just nothing like being able to grow your own organic food. That store-bought chicken, for example, it isn't nearly as nutritious and it doesn't taste as good either. Some people think it's silly I do things like make our family's bread and grow as much of our food as I can, but the truth is I would never be able to afford what I'm able to do myself at home. And even though my feet are aching bad at the end of the day, it's worth it. For the home educators out there, I promised I would give a little update as to how our homeschool journey is going right now and what's happening there. I just graduated our oldest son and my daughter is on his heels. This is my next high schooler. He just started high school this year. I've got a middle schooler and 2 elementary schoolers. Kids and I had a talk this year about how we wanted the homeschool year to go, and they also expressed that they like schooling on the main floor. So we switched places with our office and our library homeschool areas. And I have to say it's going really well. If you want a tour of our new homeschool room, I will be doing one soon, but it won't be here. Stick around to the end of this video and I'll tell you where to find it.
Today is a really big day. It's our first day back to homeschool. We do year-round homeschooling, but we usually do take some time off. And this year we took a little more time off than we normally like to take off, or than what I normally like to take off. I think the kids enjoy the time off, but now it's time to get back to the old homeschool grindstone. Obviously, we still have a garden that is in full swing. It is just now starting to get super productive. So the way I decided to set things up is to have Monday as a garden and kitchen day. Basically, I'm going to be cleaning out the fridges on Mondays. I'm going to be harvesting a whole bunch of food from the garden, which I'll probably have to do more than just on Monday. But after the kids and I finish the garden work and get the produce brought in, they are going to go hit their studies. So that's the plan. They're already actually studying. I felt like I had to hit the ground running this year. So we had family come, and then basically we just really had to dive in with homesteading and gardening to get the garden caught back up. And now it's back to homeschool time. And I've just been running ever since. There hasn't really been a summer break for me. It's okay. I'll rest when it starts to turn cold outside. So what I've done with the kids' homeschool day on Monday is I've assigned a lot of independent work that they do not need me for. They're going to be doing math, which is an online program we use. They're going to be doing lots of reading and just a bunch of subjects that they do not need my help for. I'm here if they have questions, but the way I planned out their homeschool year, they shouldn't have too many questions. By the way, if you are interested in more of our homeschooling journey, I just started a secondary channel dedicated just for homeschoolers, and it's where I am moving all of my strictly homeschool content and putting it in videos. Here you will still find just little bits and pieces of our homeschool journey. If you want more in-depth peeks into our homeschool process and my homeschool process, you definitely want to check out my other channel. It's called Homeschooling with Shayla.
I was birthed in the mountains under